The village of Zalesia was a small but strategically important location, as it had a narrow lane connecting two major highways that were important for supplying the fascist troops. In the summer of 1942, the Germans chose this location as a temporary base, and the houses of the village peasants became their barracks. The inhabitants, who were forced to become cheap labor, worked on deforestation, while the women washed the uniforms and cooked food for the fascists. Those who refused to cooperate disappeared into the nearby forest, and no one ever saw them again. Marfa, an elderly woman known as the witch doctor and a widow, lived in a small leaning hut. She was known to help with curing children who had fallen ill, casting spells for fever or scaring away those seeking wrong advice. However, she did not have good relations with her neighbors and was not a friend to them, but she did help when needed. When an officer, Stefan, was found in the house on the outskirts of Mayer, a young and superstitious woman drew attention to the old icon that hung in her corner. She asked, "Why do you need this?" He pointed with his finger, "You're the old darkness, Marfa." He looked at her coldly and said, "And you are the German executioner." But he kept silent this time. She decided to leave her grandmother for later, although her house had been turned over. They even searched for a radio station, but they did not find one, because she was associated with the partisans, and it was not possible for Mayer to discover this among the interrogations of the villagers. At night, the officer was superstitious about the forest, but one of the soldiers who had shot a cow near her house died of an unknown disease 2 days later. Another soldier stumbled on the threshold of her home and broke his leg a few days later. A couple of days after that, the old woman was summoned to the authorities. The village club, where the Germans had established their headquarters, was the location where she entered, stepping heavily on wooden steps in silence. Only her slow footsteps could be heard. Mayer was sitting at a table, smoking a cigarette, and a fat man with an irritated expression was standing next to him, presumably the translator. The mayor began speaking without looking up. "Why are you acting as if we are not in charge here? You are not the masters here, and you are not the owner of this Russian land." Marfa stood there without showing any fear or emotion. "You are working against us. You are connected with partisans, and who gave you the right to enter the forest?" He rose from his seat, leaning on the table. "I will start hitting you right on that wrinkled face until you die." Marfa chuckled softly. "I go into the forest to gather firewood. It is useless to beat me unless I die. It is no use for you." Mayer slammed his hand on the table and grabbed her arm. "You're not afraid of death." "I've lost my children, and I have been hugging her since then," she replied, and something strange seemed to flash in her eyes. "But you will meet her very soon," and fierce Mayer let her go, stepping back a step. At that moment, it seemed to him that her eyes became black as a swamp. He remained silent, embarrassed, waving his hand at her. Marfa was taken to a barn where they were kept under guard. In the evening, the soldiers massacred all the villagers, herded them into the square. The soldiers roughly dragged the old people out of their houses, kicked the children out, drove them into a general formation. Martha was brought out last. She was placed in the center. "This woman is the cause of all your problems," Mayer said, addressing the crowd. "She communicates with the partisans. My loyal soldier and an old acquaintance has died. You have a choice to become accomplices to her. If anyone knows anything besides rumors and the small things you reported during interrogations." The residents were silent. No one said anything. Marfa looked at the audience. "Partisans," she said. "Yes, everything. It has been a long time since that happened. No, they have left. I killed that German of yours." But the people mayor raised his hand to give the order. The first one rumbled, but her face remained calm. The ground around was stained with blood. Branches swayed around the bird in a small clearing hidden among the pines. The fire was barely burning. 5 partisans sat silently checking their weapons. One turned the cartridges in the palm of his hand. Another wiped the optics of the rifle. Their faces were harsh and weathered, fatigue in their eyes. Suddenly, in the dark, something rustled. The noise of footsteps on dry needles forced everyone to be alert. One of the fighters, a young man with a hat covering his eyes, raised his rifle. "Who's coming?" His voice broke the silence sharply. A small figure covered in mud and sweat with eyes full of fear. It was Vanka, a village idiot boy who often hangs out. At the edge of the forest, near the cowshed, the man stumbled, falling to his knees and gasping, shouted, "They are Germans, shooting people everywhere. Help me! What are you doing here alone?" asked Semyon, the eldest of the group. His voice was low and hoarse. He had hidden behind the barn with manure so that the Germans would not find him. Vanka, the youngest, began to suffocate and somehow stupidly shook his fist in the air. Marfa, all of them were killed calmly. Semyon barked, coming closer and shaking the boy by the shoulders. Where are the Germans now? You saw them all. The boy's voice broke into sobbing. Semyon cursed, looking at his men. We have no choice. Dawn is coming soon. Therefore, we must now smoke out the reptiles. They have machine guns, and there are 5 of us, pure suicide. This is to leave them there and know about it for the rest of our lives. While we are sitting here, people, we are being killed. We will come and at least let the distracted bushes stay alive. Vanka clung to my leg. No. Take me with you. I know where. Let's go. But Semyon was tough. Release Sidi understood. If you want to live. When the partisans reached the village, dawn had already dawned. The village was quiet. Too quiet. Even the dogs did not bark. No screams, noise, or even the usual smell. Only a light fog crept between the houses. What the hell? Muttered Alexei, his hands tightening on the rifle. This is not a village. Some kind of cemetery. Another pushed a bucket standing right in the middle of the road with his boot. Semyon gave a hand sign, pointing to the center. They were walking carefully, checking every house. Not a soul anywhere. Where Vanka said there should have been corpses, blood. Since they did not manage to do it. But there were only German things here. Machine guns, boxes of ammunition, empty helmets, papers, even food. But there was not a single body, or rather, where are they? Whispered Alexei, commander. Semyon approached one of the crates. There were maps on top and several German documents. He took them in his hand and ran his eyes over the text. These were reports of military operations, with stamps and signatures. Everything was in place, except for the Germans themselves. Perhaps they left at night, he said dully. But where did they go without weapons and equipment? Another fighter objected, kicking one of many machine guns that were lying on the ground. Clearly, something had happened on the edge of the square, near the tree. Alexei bent down and picked something up from the ground. Look, commander, there was blood on his fingers. A dark, sticky liquid was flowing down to the ground, leaving a thick trail. It means there had been, Semyon muttered. His eyes were focused, and he looked intently at the square where they were now. Then suddenly, Alexei froze. The commander, Semyon, looked up at the end of the street, about 100 meters away. At the edge of the forest, a shadow flashed through the fog. A tall, black figure stood motionless, as if watching. Hey, who's there? Shouted Semyon, aiming back. Semyon waved his hand. Okay, let's get the useful stuff and get out of here, he said. They quickly retreated back to the forest, leaving the ghost village behind. To this day, no one knows how. In that village, there are crosses in the cemetery, exactly according to the number of inhabitants. On one photo displayed on a metal plaque, Marf hugs his children, who were put there and when no one knows. Gentlemen, if you liked this story, please write your own, at least a short comment. Only thanks to the comments, this video will be promoted. Have a good day, dear friends.